Welcome, everybody. Simon Rosenberg here at Hopium Chronicles. This is our monthly gathering of our paid subscribers. Thank you all for helping fund this important work and spread Hopium all around the land. Your financial support makes all this possible. So thank you so much for your help and for being here and for all that you do for not just me, but for Democrats in the country writ large. We are at the beginning of year 2 of Hopium, and as you know, you've gotten some messages from me about it, some thoughts and plans, which we can talk more about in the Q&A later. But it's exciting. We've grown. We're off to a great start in the first year. We're up to 60,000 subscribers. It's hard to believe. We're making some noise as well, as you all can see in the last few weeks, and I'm just really pleased to be in this fight with all of you and excited to be with all of you. What I'm going to do tonight is what I usually do, which is I'm going to give you my thoughts on where things are, and then we'll have some Q&A afterwards, and we'll go to the top of the hour. So I come back to this basic understanding of the election, which is that Joe Biden is a good president. The country's better off. The Democratic Party is strong, unified, raising lots of money and winning elections all across the country. And they have Trump, who is the ugliest political thing that all of us have ever seen. And that in every way imaginable, 7 months out, I would much rather be us than them. So let's go through those 3 main points. Number 1, Joe Biden's been a good president. I think it's indisputable that the country is far better off today than when Joe Biden came into office. If you all remember, right, he came into office in January 20th of 2021. The vaccines had not been distributed. COVID was raging across the country after having been badly mismanaged by the former president. The economy was in shambles. The global economy was teetering. We just had an insurrection and an attack on our democracy. We had the first unpeaceful or challenged the peaceful transfer of power in our history. The city itself that I live in the capital was under military occupation, essentially. And things were deeply unsettled in America, and look how far we've come. I mean, we've got the strongest recovery of any G7 country. We have the lowest inflation of any G7 country. The economy, we have the best job market since the 1960s, the lowest uninsured rate in American history. Real wage growth is some of the fastest that we've seen in recent decades. We know that inflation's too high, and I don't want to oversell what happened today. I mean, it was just a tiny bit above their expectations, and it could come back down next month. We can't get overly freaked out about what happened to the inflation numbers today. And inflation is far better than it was, and it was all this is all predicated on a global phenomenon that happened all around the world. The deficit is trillions of dollars less. We have, a very elevated worker participation rates now in the United States of prime age workers. We have some of the the most job openings per workers in modern times. And we also have the most significant and what's the right word? We have the largest new business formation. The most new businesses are being founded in many, many decades in the United States, and many of them being founded by Black and Hispanic entrepreneurs. And so, the economy, we are in a far better place today. And I think that Joe Biden, on the fundamental promise that he made to us in 2020, that he was going to get us to the other side of COVID successfully, I think he's done that. I mean, we still have work to do. I'm not going to be Pollyannish about this, but we are in far better shape, I believe, than is the conventional wisdom out in the hinterlands. And what's important to recognize is I think something very significant has happened over the last few weeks, which is that the success of the Biden presidency has helped evaporate all of their main attacks against the president. The economy is booming. It's not in recession. Inflation's down. It's not up. We have crime is not raging. It's actually murder rates and violent crime rates are down significantly all across the country. There is no war on energy, which was the central argument they made against Biden, that he created inflation by creating this war on energy, which drove gas prices up. And yet we saw last year that we had the most renewables, gas, and oil ever produced in American history. And the United States in 2023 produced more oil than any country has ever produced in any one year in all the history of the world, right? So if he was waging a war on energy, it was a pretty terrible one. The border, which was an area of advantage for them, a second tier issue, by the way, for voters, but an area of advantage for Republicans, I think they've stumbled on that, and now we're the party that wants to bring order to the border, and they want to, maintain chaos. We litigated this in New York 3 just with Tom Suozzi, and we're able to come out on top in an actual live fire test of this kind of new environment post, I think, Trump screwing this issue up. And then on the central issues about Biden himself, the first one being the Biden crime family story. We've learned that it was a Russian disinformation op that was once again laundered by willful Republicans in Congress. And then on his age, I think he did a lot to assuage people's concerns about his age at the State of the Union. We also learned that her special counsel report that supposedly drew into question his age was actually fabricated and false. It was an extraordinary moment, in this that we have now special counsels lying and making stuff up about people in the other party during their special counsel investigations. And so it's my view that what's happening right now is that the election is moving from a referendum on Biden to a referendum on Trump. And that's not an election that they're going to win, given his historic awfulness. Number two, the Democratic Party is strong, unified, raising lots of money, and winning elections all across the country. And excuse me for a second. And they are historically, they are, as I called it today, they're a raging dumpster fire as a political party. All of you know that we've been winning elections. I'm just going to text my family to see if somebody can go make my dog happy. I don't know if you guys can hear him, but he's on a. Katie, thank you.
You got to take care of the dog.
So I can hear him. My dog can bark for an hour without stopping. He's a special, very special part of our family. So number two, the party, right? We, as all of you know, and I won't go through this all again because I've done it so many times, but since Dobbs, we did in 2018 and 2020, we defeated MAGA, right? We took away the House, the Senate, the presidency. Defeating an incumbent president is never easy. We won that election by 4.5 points. Yes, it was close in the battlegrounds. But then something happened, I think, in these last few years that's even more miraculous than what we did in 2018 and 2020, which is that the party in power, always loses seats, and power ebbs and flows away from the party in power to the other party. And that hasn't happened. We picked up a Senate seat in 2022. We picked up 2 governorships net. We picked up 4 state legislative chambers in 2022. We gained ground in the battleground in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania. We got all the way up to 59% in Colorado, 57% in Pennsylvania, 55 in Michigan, 54 in New Hampshire. And what's important is that those results would have been really good results in a good year. And this was a so-called bad year, a red wave year, a year of high inflation, low Biden approval. It was an extraordinary performance. In 2023, we did, even better. It was a blue wave year all across the country in 2023. And then in early 2024, we're seeing the same basic dynamic of Biden overperforming, the Democrats overperforming expectations, raising lots of money, strong grassroots, and Republicans struggling. And if you remember, we were all told that New York 3 was a big bellwether that was going to tell us a lot about this election. And, the polls had us up 2 or 3 points, and we won by 8 points in a district that we had lost just 16 months earlier by 7.5 points. And so you continue to see this basic dynamic of us being strong and overperforming and Republicans struggling. And we now know the fundraising numbers, right? The numbers we're raising. We have, and this last filing, we have $100 million more than Trump does in the Republican side. We're also raising money at a more rapid rate. So the advantage we have is growing, right? Don't believe that he raised $50 million the other night. There's not any reason whatsoever to believe any of those numbers, right? It's ridiculous that the media was even buying into any of this. They're struggling to raise money. They're cash poor. They've laid off staff. They're not building staff. Their party is in shambles. Our party is also very unified. And you just saw in the last few weeks that Biden's done events now with Clinton and Obama and Bernie Sanders. And there was no significant opposition to Biden in the primary whatsoever. There was an opportunity to go challenge him. And the 2 guys that did, RFK and Dean Phillips, really flamed out. And RFK has had to leave the Democratic Party. He was failing so poorly. He was doing so poorly against Biden. So the party, in my view, is strong. We're winning elections, raising tons of money. We're building a really strong campaign. And it's very unified, historically unified, I think, as we head into the general election. They are a raging dumpster fire, right? They're not raising any money. They've got enormous hard dollar problems. The RNC is in turmoil. Their campaign is 2, 3, 4, 5 months behind us without enough time to make up ground, right? We've had record retirements coming out of the House. And Republicans are not just retiring from the House, they're quitting and giving 2 weeks notice, which is unprecedented in all the time that I've been here, in the more than 30 years I've been here. What else? What are my other stories about about their party? Just their party's a mess. Their whole thing's a mess. Oh, and then he has unprecedented opposition inside his own party. People like Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney. We've never seen the kind of open rebellion against the nominee that there is right now in the Republican Party. And that splintering was evident in the 2022 election. Those MAGA candidates that ran in 2022 were unable to bring their party back together. The non-MAGA part of the Republican Party just didn't go along with MAGA. And that's the likely scenario in this election. The likely scenario is that we stay unified, and what I've been saying, to be clear, if you read my writing, I even said it in an MSNBC op-ed back in December, that the likely sscenario is that as the campaign turned on and we got deeper into the general election and people started paying attention, that Biden's poll numbers would go up. And that's exactly what's happened. I mean, we've gone up a 0.23 somewhere in there in the last, since the State of the Union. It actually began before the State of the Union, by the way, the movement towards Biden. And now, Biden is ahead in the last few weeks in more polls than Trump is. We got 3 more polls today showing Biden ahead. He's now ahead by +3, +4 in some of these polls. Many of the polls that Trump has led in are Republican funded polls, and particularly the Wall Street Journal poll, which freaked everybody out last week. I just want to remind everybody that poll was paid for by Rupert Murdoch, and the pollster was Trump's own pollster. There's just simply no reason for us to have taken that poll seriously at this point in the election. And we know that Republicans have played games with polling. It's what happened in 2022. So I feel like things are getting better. We've also had polls in the last few weeks showing Biden ahead in Michigan, ahead in Wisconsin, ahead in Pennsylvania. Our Senate candidates are doing really well all across the country. There's not a single Senate candidate that matters to us that's struggling or behind right now. And then finally, on polling, we just got a poll today, came out an hour or two ago in North Carolina by Quinnipiac, a large sample poll showing Josh Stein up 8 points over Mark Robinson and us only down 2 in North Carolina, which is within margin of error. It's the second poll taken in the last 2 weeks in North Carolina showing the race within margin of error. And we know that Arizona, in all likelihood, got much tougher for the Republicans in the last few days. The Biden campaign is also now staffing up in Florida. We're going to see how real that becomes. But I think if you watched the interview I did with Ann Hochkammer today, I'm not giving up on Florida. I think it's something we have to pay attention to. There's an extraordinary constellation of things that are happening there that could make Florida at least on the outer end of what, possible if we have a really good election. And I don't think we should, as you all know, my whole theory of this cycle is about growth and expansion and taking stuff away from them. So when I look at all the recent polling, I'm encouraged, and because this is exactly what us and the campaign and many people thought was going to happen, which is that once people start engaging, the awfulness of Trump and the success of the Biden presidency was going to become clearer. The contrast was going to become clearer. And I think that's part of what we've seen in recent weeks. And then finally, Trump, right? We all know that, I described him as my new term is the ugliest political thing that we've all ever seen. And that may be actually modest in the way that we're describing him. I mean, he is, let's just go through it, right? His performance on the stump is far more degraded, impulsive, and erratic and disturbing than it was he's a much weaker candidate in my view than he was in 2016 and 2020. I also think that there's no real comparison that we can make between 2024 and 2016 and 2020, because I think everything changed after Dobbs. And I think these efforts to try to talk about this election like other elections is a waste of time. It's 2024. It's not 2016. It's not 2020. It's got its own unique dynamics. And I think that part of it is that we're in this post-Dobbs era where Republicans have continually struggled, because I do think that something broke inside the Republican Party with Dobbs, that that a big chunk of the Republican Party, 15, 20, 25%, was like, this is too much. We've gone too far. And they became loosened from the Republican Party. I'm not saying they're going to vote for us. I'm not saying they're going to stay home, but that the relationship between the MAGA part of the Republican Party and the non-MAGA part has been loosened and attenuated in recent years. And it's a huge challenge for them. And in this election. And I think that Trump's performance is severely degraded. I also think that he's campaigning from the courthouse and not the White House, and I think that you can't underestimate how significant that is over time. He doesn't have the White House as a backdrop. He has no ability to generate positive news. The news coming out about him every day is just relentlessly negative and down. And I think that, in my own view, I don't know what's going to happen in any of these trials. It's very possible he doesn't get convicted in any of them. But I don't know that it really matters politically. It may matter legally, but politically, there are 6 things that voters are going to find out about Donald Trump in the next few months that they didn't know about him in 2020 that I think are going to be consequential. Number 1, that he raped E. Jean Carroll in a department store dressing room. Number 2, that he oversaw one of the largest financial frauds in American history, and his family he and his kids have now been banned from doing business in New York. 3, that he stole America's secrets, lied to the FBI about it, shared those secrets with other people in what may be the largest security breach in the history of the United States. 4th, that he led an insurrection against the United States, he led an armed attack on the Capitol on one of the only days that all 435 members are there all at the same time. And he's promised to end American democracy for all time if he actually gets into the White House in January of 25. 5th, that he and his family have corruptly taken more money from foreign governments than any political family in American history. And 6th, that he's singularly responsible for ending Roe. And I don't know how he survives any one of those 6. He's going to have to survive all of them. And I just don't think that he has the standing with the public, the political skills, the campaign apparatus underneath him, right, to be able to withstand what's about to happen to him. And you're already starting to see erosion in him. I mean, it's not just that we're going up, is that I think you're starting to see erosion with Trump. And so when I put all this together, right, I am optimistic. I'm not Pollyannish. I'm not predicting. There's no predicting. I don't predict the future. This has been the story in the New York Times, I think, was a little bit not accurate about what I do. What I do is I tell you what I think what is the likely scenario in this election. That's what I did in 2022. Obviously, things are going to change, right? Elections change all the time. In 2016, the polls weren't wrong, but the election changed at the end. I mean, this stuff can happen. Comey changed the election in the last 10 days. Hillary was cruising to victory until Comey intervened in the election 10 days out. And so, things are going to change. We already have these inflation numbers today, right? That's change, right? We're getting changes. Trump may get convicted of a crime in the next 30 days. That's going to change things, right? But when you look at all the things that are happening and the general trajectory of things, I would much rather be us than them. And I feel really good about where we are. I also, one of the couple like intangibles, right, that I will just put out there is that I think the Biden campaign, it's often the case that re-election campaigns are very conservative because the command and control structure is complicated because it has to not just go through the campaign, but also through the White House too. And the White House and the campaign are, far away from each other. And sometimes decision-making gets a little sclerotic in a re-election campaign. I don't think that's happening with this campaign. I think they're being given, particularly the communications operation, the digital communications operations, being given a very long leash, and Biden is really playing along, and they're getting the most out of Biden I think we could possibly get in the digital front. And I've been really impressed with the aggressiveness of the digital team, the speed in which they're operating, the ambition that they have. They're taking risks, right? They're charting kind of new ground in the videos they're doing. This has been really important because it's how we're going to reach young people, right? I mean, we have to be able to show up digitally through organic content where that we not just ads but organically created content that can be shared through social networks. We're creating a fair amount of this pretty early in the campaign, and it's also competent and good and strong in addition to the TV ads that I'm constantly sharing with you. This stuff's a little bit harder to share because they also post 15 20 times a day, 30 times a day, but it's called Biden Harris HQ. And if whatever social media platform you're on, you should be subscribing to it. I think you will feel that they're bringing it and they're hustling and that, they're trying really hard and are punching they're punching Trump hard in their work. And I've been really impressed with how, every election cycle, when you run for president, you have to reinvent a campaign. There's new tactics, new strategies, new tools, like all the grassroots stuff that we're all involved in. This is all kind of new stuff. And the digital piece of this campaign is very successful, very early, very innovative, powerful. And it's been really encouraging to me because somebody made a decision to let these guys go and trust them. And it's this guy, Rob Flaherty, who I should probably have on here and bring and talk to all of you so he can talk about what they're doing. So I feel good. And I'm also just really proud that Hopium's growing. I'm glad that our community is growing. I'm proud of all the money we've been raising, right? I mean, we have raised for Anderson Clayton close to $170,000 of early money, really critical in helping give her the tools to be successful. We've raised over $120,000 now for Ruben Gallego, and he texted me and thanked me. And you saw that Anderson actually came on to our community and thanked us a few weeks ago, right? And then we've raised a lot of money for Joe Biden. We've sent thousands and thousands of people in there. And I will be announcing soon some additional recommendations of things that people can do. I'm a little behind where I was. It was a little bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be honest. And because I want to only recommend things to you that I'm really going to get behind. I don't want to give you a big, long list. I'm going to give you a small, concentrated list. I'm still very happy that we played such a leading role in Arizona. Arizona to me is North Carolina and Arizona. I'm very comfortable that those are the two states that we've made our biggest investments in so far. I'm really proud of that. I think it's the right place for us to have gone, and we need to continue to work there in both of those states. And then that's it. Let me get to questions. But anyway, thanks everybody. I mean, I'm really I think we're making a difference, and B, I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm really just grateful for all of you to have, because of your financial support. This is all you've helped make this all possible. Let me address the two questions that I know are going to come up right away. And so let me just get to those. RFK and Israel, Gaza. So RFK, some of you have, and by the way, I'm only going to take written questions because, and so if you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll be diving in there for everybody. So RFK, as many of you have heard, I have argued now for months that the most significant rogue party, third party, splinter party movement in America is the Never Trumpers, and they're aligned with us. And they may become very significant in this election. I mean, if Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and others campaign with Joe Biden in the final couple of months of the election, it will be an unprecedented coming together of two American political parties and leaders of two American political parties to defend democracy. I think this is possible. I think we have work to do. The campaign and the Biden world has work to do to create as much comfort for these Republicans to come into our coalition. But I feel like this is the most significant of the efforts that are underway that has already been consequential and could be again in this election cycle. Second is, look, No Labels is gone, everybody. I mean, congratulations. I mean, I can't tell you how many presentations that I've given in the last year where the 87 questions about the freak out about No Labels, right? It's gone. Congratulations, everybody, right? Golf clap for all of us. And particularly for the people that fought hard against No Labels. One of the threats to Biden is now gone. Now it's RFK. And let's just be very clear, everybody. RFK is a ludicrous, ridiculous political figure. Sort of the example of how far that the Republican Party and greater MAGA have fallen. I'm just going to say a couple of things about RFK because I'm going to be starting to engage him more frontally, and the campaign's been engaging him already because we have to engage him. We have to degrade him, right? We have to take him seriously and take him down. There are two things that I would say about him that stand out to me, or three things. One is his performance when he speaks is comical, and it's impossible to take him seriously when you listen to him talk. He lies incredibly. He gets called out on lying. It's unbelievable how many television appearances he's been on where they roll tape and show that he's just bald-faced lying. I've never seen anything like this other than Trump, because they've never done it to Trump directly. Robert Kennedy's been confronted by people in the media for his lying more directly than any politician that I've ever seen. And we're only in the beginning of this whole thing. He's a ridiculous figure, and we shouldn't be scared by him, right? Second is that his anti-vax stuff and his suspicion of public health and healthcare is a huge problem for him, and because it's lunacy. And remember, he was an appointed official in the Trump administration. He was appointed to a vax board. He was part, Trump appointed him. He took an appointment from Donald Trump. His whole campaign is being run. His super PAC is all Republican political operatives. His money is coming from Trump's biggest supporters. I mean, what? And so the whole thing about Kennedy is that it's a fraud, right? This is a greater MAGA project. It's just so naked and obvious. We saw that video this week that I showed on our site, and we're going to work very hard to make sure the media doesn't play this campaign straight. It's a fraudulent campaign. It's being funded and created by MAGA, and it's not a presidential campaign, right? I don't know what it is. We have to figure out some other way of talking about it. But it's an insult to us as a country that we have to look at this and pretend like this is a real thing and this is a serious candidate, when it's just another way to go after Biden. It's an illicit way to go after Biden, right? Third is that one of the things I'm going to be writing about in the next few days is I think Robert Kennedy is an agent of the Russian government. And I'm just going to say it right now. When you go look at the things that he has been saying in the last 10 days, it is as if these talking points are literally written in Moscow and given to him. And there are two concrete examples of this. The email that he sent out on Friday that got so much attention, he said that he equated the civil rights abuses of Snowden, Julian Assange, and the January 6th folks, right? Let's just unpack that for a second. Snowden is one of the greatest traitors in American history. He lives in Moscow. He was part of a Russian operation to steal secrets in the United States. He is, an ally of Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. Two, Julian Assange. Julian Assange's organization was a cutout for Russian intelligence that helped throw the election of Donald Trump in 2016. And three, the January 6th. Those people attacked the Capitol and tried to overthrow the American government, right? In what universe are these sympathetic figures? In what universe could an American politician and patriot view these people as people that we are defending and aligning with, right? It's like the only possible way that you would come up with those three things is if you were sitting in Moscow, right? Because the first two are direct allies of Vladimir Putin, right? And have been detrimental to our democracy and to the security of the United States. And the third group attacked the United States itself, right? Who looks at them with admiration? The second thing is that in an interview he gave last week, he used the most rancid language to describe what was happening in Ukraine that included that he believed that Putin went in to denazify, Ukraine, which is an absurd Putin construction that is an absurdity on every possible level. And nobody, even in MAGA world, nobody talks like that. The only people that use the term denazification is Putin. The only person in the whole world that uses that language is Vladimir Putin and Robert Kennedy, right? Last week in an on-camera interview, we have the video. I don't know how one of the stories of our time is going to be about how Russia penetrated the Republican Party and other political leaders in the United States. It's something that we have to have a more honest and overt conversation around. It's something I've worked on quite a bit, and I don't talk about it very much at Hopium, but it's going to become more of a part of our discussion about what's happening and the threat to the United States. And then finally, Israel-Gaza. There's no evidence that this is having a major impact on Joe Biden. And we have to it doesn't mean it can't, it doesn't mean that it won't, but it isn't right now. There just isn't any data to support this. There is no big fissure in the Democratic Party. His poll numbers are going up, right? The Democratic Party's congressional generic numbers are going up. His numbers in many of the battleground states are improving, right? There's no drag on him. He's actually going up, right? We are ahead in Michigan, for example, in the latest poll in Michigan by 3 points. We've been tied in Michigan and within margin of error. We're actually doing better in Michigan in public polling than virtually any other state in the country that's competitive right now. And then third, I just went to the Economist YouGov poll, which is a great weekly track that comes out on Wednesdays. So this is a very fresh data. Among 18 to 29-year-olds, their most important issue, foreign policy, was 2%. And here are the issues that polled higher than foreign policy in this poll for 18 to 29-year-olds. inflation, healthcare, jobs in the economy, climate, abortion, education, and immigration, and civil rights, right? It's at the very bottom. And so this idea that, and I think for those of us in the business who've been doing this a long time, the idea that a marginal 25-year-old would be voting on Israel Gaza in October, given all these other issues, was always absurd, actually, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that there isn't a passionate group of Democrats that view this issue as their central issue. We understand that, right? We understand that, but it's an incredibly small universe of people. And we have to stop pretending that this is some kind of huge organized threat, or the way I describe it is that Israel Gaza is a challenge to Joe Biden. It's not a threat. What's happening with Donald Trump and the rebellion in the Republican Party against him is an existential threat to his candidacy. This is like in every campaign and every broad coalition that you build, you've got coalition management issues. But imagine that the way that you run a presidential campaign is that any group of 40 or 50,000 people could have veto power over the rest of the agenda of a campaign. It's an absurdity. And so we have to stop. What I've talked about is that we need to pull apart the politics of Israel Gaza from the policy. We can have a policy discussion and a policy debate, and we should. We don't have to agree on everything. I don't agree with folks in our party about this issue, right? I haven't always agreed with Joe Biden, right? But let's have a policy debate. But this notion that this is going to cost us the election, it's just bullshit. And it has gone on too long. I'm going to start fighting this a little bit more aggressively. And we've even had, frankly, inside the Hopium community over the last couple of days, somebody who's been spreading what I feel is could be completely false information about this. And I've been challenging it because I don't let false information live outside, and I'm not going to let it live inside our community either. And the people who are critics of Joe Biden on this are disrespectful to the president, and they're disrespectful to us because they're often presenting information that is not true to us about what's actually happening on the politics of all of this. And so, I'm not threatened. I think, look, this is a challenge. Iran may strike Israel the next few days. This is going to be, a major challenge for us going forward. But I stand by my president on this. I think this has been a very tough challenge, and I'm not in a place where I feel that this is in any way a serious threat to his campaign and to our coalition. It could be, right? Many things could happen. A meteor could hit the earth tomorrow, right? But it isn't today. Okay, let me get to your written questions. I'm going to go to the Q&A, and I also know there's been a lot in the chat. Donna asked about, look, the Biden campaign and the DNC are talking about Kennedy all the time, producing content against him all the time. There is a super PAC being created that's going to specifically educate voters about Kennedy. We don't yet know what that means, right? We don't understand yet about whether they're going to be doing ads. I mean, this is still in the early stages. But yeah, I mean, they're taking this really seriously. And I think that, we also, as you often hear me talk, it's my view that we should be spending 2/3 of our time spreading positive information about Joe Biden and the Democrats, and then 1/3 of our time indicting and going after them, that 1/3 of our time going after them and degrading them and informing our communities about them. Now, some of that time has to be Kennedy time. But I will tell you, having done this for a long time, Kennedy is such a ridiculous figure that I don't think look, our opponent in this election is Donald Trump. And that is where we have to spend most of our time. I'm not convinced that Kennedy is going to rise up to be something of great significance. I mean, we have to degrade him and engage him, but we cannot get spooked by him either, right? Like, we're very capable of giving, our family is very capable of giving our opposition power that they don't actually have or that they haven't earned themselves. And we have to be really careful. Let's let Robert Kennedy and his goofy vice president candidate, go out and make their case. I think every time he speaks, he loses voters, and so I think this is, again, my basic take on where we are right now is that all the things that we need to do to win are within our power to do and are within traditional political bounds that can be achieved. It doesn't mean we will, right? I mean, and if you use the NCAA tournament, the higher seed team doesn't always win, right? But we're the higher seed team here, in my view, and they're the lower seed, and we should win this election. because the things that we have to do are within our power to do. What they have to do, which is to make that guy look like a serious presidential candidate again, I don't think that that's within their power to do. I don't think he can be dressed up. I mean, you saw what I said to, that he wears more makeup than a drag queen. I mean, he is his perform, they're basically, he's not campaigning anymore, right? Like the guy campaigning from the basement this time is Trump, because they can't let him out, because every time he goes out and speaks, he says crazy stuff that causes enormous harm to the campaign. And so, they've got, this guy he's a terrible candidate. And, we have to work hard with our friends and our communities to treat this like the emperor has no clothes, right? We have to start saying the emperor has no clothes, and he doesn't have any clothes. The orange emperor doesn't have any clothes. Everybody, right? Like, we're pulling the curtain back from the wizard, whatever the analogy is. This guy, and I feel like the media is starting to shift. If you've watched my TV appearances that I've been sharing with you, and I have more coming up, you can feel the media shifting a little bit in recognizing. And I think what's happened in Washington, in the elite world here, is their fundraising problems that they've had has really been kind of a major issue in the internal way that political people here assess the health of his candidacy. I think it's been shocking to people here how much trouble they've had raising money, his underperformance. I showed that Axios piece, which documented his underperformance in polling and in the early states, the opposition to him. These are all things we've been talking about here for months, but now they're being openly talked about in ways they weren't in the media a few months ago. And there is this sort of creeping sense that maybe this guy is actually a big, is not a serious candidate, to use a euphemism. I will say, by the way, for those of you, I'm starting to do more in-person travel and more in-person events. This is a new part of Hopium. I'm still struggling my way through it, frankly, a little bit. It's a little bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And so, for example, I'm in Arizona next week, but I'm also going to be in Arlington, Virginia, doing a fundraiser for the Arlington County Democratic Party on Saturday night. For those of you in the DC region, if you want to come and hang out. I'm going to Wisconsin in June. I'm now also going to go to Minnesota. I'm coming to Minnesota. I spoke to Ken Martin, the state party chair in Minnesota. I'm going to try to do more of these events, and so I can start seeing more of you in person as I travel around the country. And I still have to work that out. Let me just look at other questions here. Yeah, I mean, look, the Senate races, I want to just remind everybody, right, that there is no bad polling for us in any Senate race. It doesn't mean there won't be. It doesn't mean that we won't start seeing one of our candidates drop behind, but all the polling in Pennsylvania looks good. Tester is I think there's a general view that Tester and Brown are much more likely to win those races than lose them, right? Because they're both unique and powerful candidates, very well suited to their states. I think Arizona, where we were already ahead in the polling, has gotten better. I think Pennsylvania, all the early polling there shows that we're in very good shape in Pennsylvania. Alyssa Slotkin is up, 3-4 points in Michigan. I think that's a race we may have to start paying a little bit more attention to. I still think I just want to be clear. I think we're going to win Michigan by 4, 5, 6 points in this election. I don't think it's going to be close, and it hasn't been close recently. And I think one of the things that we don't talk enough about here is that the amount of money unions are spending in this election communicating about Biden to working class folks is unprecedented, because Biden has more authentic and legitimate and enthusiastic union support than any Democratic presidential candidates had in many, many decades. And we're already starting to see them spend lots of money communicating to their communities using very sophisticated media. I've shared some of it on the Hopium site over the last few weeks. We've never had that before. And I think that the family is going to be very forward leaning and spending a lot of money. And so in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, we have assets there we haven't had in recent years. And I will say, I meant to say this in the polling conversation. The other thing that's happened in the last few days, and I don't put a lot of stock in this, I don't really follow the predicted markets and the betting markets, but Biden's gotten ahead of Trump. in the predicted markets and the betting markets. And there are people that pay a lot of attention to that. It's often people that do risk analysis for countries or for businesses. And I've had several different firms reach out to me in the last 2 days who asked me to do presentations because they've seen these things flip in the last few days to Biden. And all of a sudden, the advice that they give to all their clients or they give inside their government that Trump was leading, there's now a lot of data showing that Trump is not leading anymore. And I am telling you, this stuff is starting to bleed into this, global conversation about where we are in the election. And it's not just Simon, spitballing here. I mean, there is now a fair amount of data. And one of the things I like today is there's this thing called Polymarket, which is one of these betting sites. They had the likelihood of Biden winning in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin up in the high 50s, each of them. And, we win the election if we win those three states, right? And so, it essentially, all these betting markets right now and all these predicted markets have Biden winning the election. And that was not true a week ago, right? I mean, I just want everyone to understand the vibe shift that's going on here. If you watch the interview in Hopium today that I did with Caitlin Collins, you saw how open she was, right, to the argument I was making. You saw it, Lawrence is always open to it. But I also went on Nicole Wallace last week. I've never met her. I had not been on her show before. She was wildly open to the argument I was making. I went on John Berman at CNN, right? He was open, and it was a little bit of a funny conversation, but I'm going on Aaron Burnett. I mean, I'm always hesitant to tell you when I'm going on a show because inevitably I get canceled and then people are like, where were you, right? But right now, in the next 5 days, I mean, I'm scheduled on Aaron Burnett tomorrow night in the 7 o'clock hour, Stephanie Rule in the 11 o'clock hour. I'm possibly going to be on MSNBC on Friday night. I'm going back on Caitlin Collins' show on Monday, and I'm likely to be on Lawrence O'Donnell's show on Tuesday, right? And so there's a lot of interest in the argument I'm making because I think people feel the election changing, and I have an explanation for it, right? I can explain what I think is happening. And it's been, yay is right? Like, this is good, everybody. This is like an unalloyed good that I'm getting to spread hopium to more and more folks in the country. I want to just say that because it's come up several questions, Hispanics, Black. I am not in the doom and gloom camp on the Democratic coalition, right? You have to start with this basic understanding that we've been winning elections like crazy everywhere all across the country for the last couple of years when we weren't supposed to be, right? So when people have had to go vote, right, like we've done better than, and Republicans have done worse. And if you go look at what happened with Trump underperformed all of his public polling. This whole idea that Trump overperforms polls, right? This is like these urban legends that sort of bleed on, these zombie ideas, right, that lead on. Because on things like Trump overperforms polls, or the battleground is always 3 to 4 points more Republican, right? Those were true before. There's no reason they're going to be true this time. They might be, but there's no ironclad. In fact, in the battleground states in 2022, we did better than public polling, right? So the exact opposite, right? The battleground was actually better for us than the national vote. And we just have to have humility, right? Every election's brand new. And there's no elections like any other. They're all sui generis. They all have their own dynamics. And what happens is people make mistakes. They get lazy and they say, well, this is like this. Well, nothing is like this. 2024 is not like any other election. It's like 2024. And I don't know that the battlegrounds are going to be 3 to 4 points more Republican. They may be, they may not be, right? I mean, Nate Cohn has actually argued that there isn't going to be a big difference this time. And so this idea now that we're hearing, well, Biden may be up in the popular vote, but he's losing in the states. We don't have enough data to make that conclusion. I think it's an absurdity, right? And in fact, as I said, we're actually up in polling in a bunch of the battlegrounds right now. And so the North Carolina poll today was unbelievably encouraging, everybody. Like, I think we're going to win North Carolina. Remember, Mark Robinson is such an extremist. I mean, he's more extreme than Trump in many ways, the guy who's the gubernatorial nominee in North Carolina. If he's down 8 points or even 6 points, Biden will catch up with Josh Stein, right? That's going to happen in Pennsylvania too. It's going to happen in Arizona, right? I mean, if our Senate candidates are up in the low 50s, Biden's going to get there. It's not going to go the other way, right? And there isn't going to be 4 to 6% of the electorate that votes, for Bob Casey and then votes for Trump. That's not going to happen. And so the strength of our Senate polling is really, really important as kind of a benchmark about where the Democrat Republican thing is in those states. And so let me just say that there's no question Biden's at 42%, 43%, 44%. He got 51% last time. Some of our coalition is wandering, right? There's no question about that. My view is, and what I've been saying for many months, is that a big chunk of that coalition would come home once the election started and the campaign turned on, and it was time for people to start paying attention. But then we have a campaign to go get the rest. And, I'm still very skeptical that the most xenophobic, racist, nativist, bigoted, anti-Semitic political leader in modern times is the guy that is seeing gains with minority voters. I'm approaching this as somebody who's worked in the Hispanic vote for a very long time. I'm approaching this with enormous skepticism. It doesn't mean it's not, and I'm also skeptical of polling as well about this stuff. I want to see what happens in actual elections, right? I want to see we could have real structural problems with young Black men and young Hispanic men, but I don't know. Let's see, right? Because I think what did happen is that during COVID, I think that Biden won the election because he argued he was going to get us to the other side of COVID, which he's done successfully. But there were, I think, for young Black men and young Hispanic men, there's been enormous disruption in recent years in their lives, right? Economic lives. COVID was wildly disruptive to young people, and if you were also people out of school age and supporting your family. I mean, this was a very difficult period. And I think that part of the legacy of what we're dealing with, or sort of the latent, was the argument that Trump made that we were shut down Democrats. And I think that shut down Democrat argument had an impact. It didn't help them win the election, but it created distance for us with a core part of our constituency, young Black and Hispanic men, that I think is fixable, right? Like, I don't think this is, and this idea that there's some kind of racial realignment happening. I'm going to be a skeptic until election day about this, right? Because Trump is a rancid racist. He is, he's done more to insult Hispanics than any modern politician. Like, I just don't believe that this guy is going to be the guy that creates a breakthrough for the Republicans with minority voters. I just don't believe it. And we'll see, right? I mean, we're going to be coming back to this, right? Again and again. And so and remember, I mean, I have a whole presentation, the Hispanic vote, that I have to update, but I want everyone to remember one thing about the Hispanic vote. In 2004, when Bush got 44%, the best a Republican had done in the last two generations, our net margin of Hispanic votes in America was 700,000 votes. We got 700,000 more Hispanic votes than Republicans. In 2020, it was 5 million, right? So because the population's grown so much, even if we get a slightly smaller share, we actually gain votes, right? If you understand the math of that. So it's in 2020, we've done better in the Southwest. So in 2004, the last time Republicans won the popular vote and won the Electoral College, and they've only done that once, right? Since 1988. 2004, there have been 6 states that flipped from Bush to us, and it's Virginia and Georgia, and then we're going to add North Carolina to that, right? And it's the 4 southwestern states: Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and New Mexico. In 2004, Bush won all 4 of those states. Republicans controlled 5 of the 8 Senate seats in those 4 states, and they controlled 14 out of the 21 House seats in those states. Today, Joe Biden won those 4 states, the first Democrat to win all 4 of them since FDR in 1940. The Republicans have no Senate seats, down from 5 in those 4 states. And we control 14 of the 23 House seats. The success we've had in bluing the Southwest is the single most successful political project of the Democratic Party in the last 25 years. And it's happened because of the Hispanic vote. Our success with Hispanics has been the most successful, in my view, party-wide project that we've had in the last 25 years. And we wouldn't have the majority we had in the House and Senate, over the last few years without this bluing of the Southwest. We wouldn't have the Electoral College majority that we have, right? this has been deeply consequential. And so our story about Hispanics is we're gaining. It's the Republican Party that's eroding the Hispanics. It's not us. As you can see, what's happened in California and the Southwest, and whether or not Colin Alred can make Texas competitive. And I'm still open. I'm still open to the idea that Florida and Texas can be competitive. We shouldn't, shut the door. But I'm not jumping into those races yet. And we have to see a little bit more information and data before, I would recommend them. I do think one of the things, if you're thinking about Arizona and Florida right now, and one of the reasons I had Anna on today is that I do think that the Florida ballot initiative may be something that Hopium gets behind, because if we win that ballot initiative, it will utterly transform Florida politics in a way that may be our biggest opportunity this cycle, to break the back of MAGA in Florida. Not the Republican Party, because there are going to be Republicans aligned working. Anna's group is bipartisan, the group she leads, but it's about breaking I had dinner with some Hopium members last night, and we talked about how you can love the sinner, but hate the sin. We have to stay focused on weakening MAGA. MAGA is the problem, not the Republican Party. MAGA is the problem. MAGA is the threat. And, we could do a lot of good for an important state by helping that ballot initiative pass, which it can. It can pass. It's going to be a titanic battle. But if we learned anything in Ohio, the governor in Ohio and the entire Republican establishment fought really hard to preserve the 6-week abortion ban in Ohio, and many of you went to work and routed them. I don't know that DeSantis is going to be, DeSantis has got a tough job. I think this thing can pass. Florida is much more historically a libertarian state than a conservative state. And so, we'll see what happens. Let me just see a few more questions. I have lots of great questions here from all of you. Yeah, lots of suggestions. Let me just tell you that it is my general bias about the guests here, and I've been conservative about bringing people on here, is that I'm almost only going to bring politicians on or people who work in campaigns. I'm not, I think that that's the world I come from. These are the people I know. And these are people, I think if you recognize and look at the conversations we've had, if you go back and look at the conversation I had with Ruben Gallego or with Gavin Newsom recently, these are people I've known a long time. And I think the quality of the interaction, the quality of the discussion is so unusual, right? People open up here. They've known me for a long time. And I think where I can do the best for you is to help introduce you to people who are, my bias here at Hopium is going to be candidates and party committees. It's my bias. I think it's where your biggest bang for your buck financially. It's the biggest bang for your buck in terms of your volunteerism. There are lots of amazing organizations doing amazing things. But, as somebody who grew up in the political side, the electoral side of the Democratic Party, I'm a Democrat. I'm a partisan Democrat. And I think sometimes we give short shift to supporting politicians in the party itself. I've been really pleased with how excited people have been with Anderson Clayton, for example, and seeing a party leader like that. We'll have Ben Wickler on. I'm going to Wisconsin doing an event with Ben, but I'll also have him on to come do an update on Wisconsin. Ben is an exemplary party leader for us. And so I'm more likely to bring those kinds of people on than I am other people in the family, right? That's the likelihood. And I am going to try to do more of these kinds of non-live interviews like I did today that are about 15 to 20 minutes long, sort of shorter things to give you windows into things that I think really matter. The live events will continue, but I also am going to be doing more, recorded events. Let me close. There's lots of great questions here, but I also think that I've answered a lot of them too, I hope. So let me close with this. And some of you have heard me say this, and by the way, I am doing my With Dems presentation tomorrow, which at some point, if you haven't watched it in the next month, please take your 30 minutes to watch it. It's really my signature thing. It's the original. Hopium flows out of With Dems. With Dems was early Hopium, and Hopium Chronicles is a descendant of With Democrats. Yeah, I'm not going to say your name properly, but yeah, Anna is amazing. If you haven't listened to the interview with Anna today, it's really incredible. Anna's an amazing person. I just had dinner with her in Miami a couple of weeks ago. I took a few days off with my family, and I saw Anna and got an update on the race. The interview is also just good. It's like a good interview, also, right? It's very fact based and interesting. It's on the site. It was in the email today. Everything's on the site, right? If you miss an email, everything's on the site, hopiumchronicles.com. Let me close with this. I spoke to a group the other day, and I of old time Democratic political leaders, and people who are older than me. I mean, I'm not a kid anymore, and I said, I my wife often asks me, when am I going to grow up and get a real job? And I said, at this point in my life, I don't think it's ever going to happen. And but why are we all here tonight doing this compared to all the other things we could be doing in our lives? Why am I working hard 6, 7 days a week for Hopium? And it comes down to something that Joe Biden talked about in his State of the Union address, which is FDR's speech in 1941, which he referred to it as the State of the Union of 1941, where FDR started rallying the American people to go fight fascism and authoritarianism. It was the beginning of the campaign to get America engaged in the European war, in World War II. And that speech was also the speech where FDR formulated the four freedoms. The freedom of want, freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom of worship, and freedom of speech and press. Right, and these four freedoms was, to me, this was the most important political speech ever given in American English, because it imagined a world, a very kind of American export to the rest of the world, but it imagined a world that was based on freedom and not dominion and not authoritarianism of control by one people over another. And it was very elegant and powerful, these four freedoms, right? And that those four freedoms then became the basis of the Atlantic Charter that was negotiated by FDR and Churchill in 1941. That became the basis of the alliance that won the war. Those four freedoms then became the basis of the UN Charter in 1945, which created our modern understanding of the world that we all live in today. Those four freedoms became the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, negotiated by Eleanor Roosevelt in 1948, which again articulated this idea that we're building a world on top of these four freedoms. And the world that has come since 1945 has the world of the four freedoms and Pax Americana is a golden age in human history. There's never been a better time to be alive in all of human history than in this period that FDR imagined and that our party has helped create over the last 80 years. We've seen life expectancy go from 45 years to 71 years. We've seen extreme poverty plummet, even though the population of the world has increased dramatically. We've seen more people living under democracies than any time in human history. We've seen literacy rates, go through the roof to hit unimaginable levels. More people have had more opportunity during this period to live their dreams than any period in the history of the world. And what's important to realize is that we did that. The Democratic Party did that. We created all that. That's something we did. It's our greatest achievement, in my view. And what's important now to recognize is that the party that you're part of and this project we're part of here at Hopium, that we're part of the most consequential political force for good in all of human history. There just hasn't been another political entity, not a religious entity, but a political entity that has created, that has had the kind of impact on the world that we've had, the Democratic Party of the United States. And what we all recognize now is that that world that we imagined and built, that golden age for human history, is under extraordinary threat right now from Russia and China and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and MAGA, right? That world is under assault. And that we as a party were called once before. FDR, as Joe Biden mentioned, that he called on us and Americans answered the call. And what I'm so proud of is that we're being called again, and all of you are answering the call. That we are stepping up, that millions of Americans are going to work every day to preserve their democracy here and democracy all around the world. That we're going to make sure that this golden age of humankind and these opportunities are there for our kids and our grandkids the way they've been for us. And that this is the fight that we're in. And I can't tell you how proud I am to be in this fight with all of you. and to also report to you that we're winning. It may not feel like that every day, but we are. We're winning, and we have to win. We have to win not just for the golden age in this remarkable world, but for our kids and our grandkids. We got to leave it all on the playing field, everybody. I think we're doing that. We still have a lot of work to do. I would much rather be us than them. We need to do more and worry less, all those phrases. But it's just been a great project to be involved with all of you. And our most important work is ahead of us. Thanks, everybody, very much. Have a good night. Keep fighting hard.